Alright, quick video on Washington, D.C. Reagan Airport doing a departure here, Special Qual Airport. Obviously the east of the Potomac River there is the Washington Mall that you have to avoid. Just taking a quick look at the SIP page that we've got here for DC, for DCA. Remain clear prohibited area P56 at all times when departing runway 1. The mandatory prohibited area P56 avoidance briefing will be accomplished. Southbound arrivals may also insert the waypoint PP56A to the FMS fixed page with a 1 nautical mile circle to help identify the south and west boundaries of the prohibited P56 airspace. Specifically in doing so, one extra thing you want to do when you do your setup here for departing Washington, some of you may or may not know this, what you can do is in your fixed page. Now, in the real world, it is a different name. However, in the sim, it's PLVIA. You can do a /1, give yourself a 1 nautical mile ring. And if we do a plan here real quick, sitting at the end of runway 1, you can see exactly what that looks like. What I've got programmed in here for the departure is the pretty much any departure that goes to the north. In this case, is the Rebel 5 RNAV off of runway 1 out to auto. And you can see what happens there on the departure itself. You know, our first fix off the runway is going to be a left turn to Rev G. You can see it here at or above 15 feet. And so essentially what happens is LNAV takes over and drives you out to Rev G. And this 1 mile ring that you draw around PLVIA is going to keep you clear of that P56 prohibited area. So a good SA tool there to draw that line, and actually standard operating procedure when you're departing this airport. A couple other things that the SIP page says with relation to the DCA runway 1 RNAV departure. To avoid P56 violations, arm LNAV prior to takeoff to ensure the flight director will command turns starting at 50 feet above airport elevation. Turns below 400 feet and beginning at 50 feet above airport elevation are approved and following RNAV SID guidance. Prohibited area P56 located 1,300 feet east of the RNAV SID center line. Due to the critical nature of the DCA runway 1 departures, complete the following in addition to the normal pre-flight and takeoff procedures. Pre-flight, select the lowest range of the navigation display. So in this case, we've got 5 selected so that we get the 2.5 mile ring showing the 1 mile ring around PLBIA. Brief, no deviation east of course is acceptable to your pilot monitoring. Enter, in this case, PLVIA in the fixed page, and enter a 1 DME circle. This depicts the western boundaries of P56 prohibited airspace. Do not fly in this airspace in nice red lettering. Prior to completing the before takeoff checklist, select LNAV on the MCP and verify a white LNAV indication displayed on the FMA roll window. So we've got LNAV, VNAV set. We're all programmed up in the box. You got LNAV and VNAV enunciated white in the FMA. Takeoff, climb to flap retraction, strictly adhere to flight director guidance. Immediately advise the pilot flying, the pilot monitoring would, of any deviation east or to the right of course from the SID lateral path. Procedure for loss of RNAV navigation immediately after takeoff. Immediately after landing, gear retraction, verify LNAV is displayed in the FMA and the flight director providing lateral guidance. If LNAV is not active or the flight director is not following the RNAV path, comply with the below guidance. Immediately turn to a heading of 310 degrees. Notify ATC if an RNAV failure has occurred. So perhaps instead of runway heading here, we'll put a 310. Not only could that help us out if we had an engine failure, but also, obviously, as we just read, a loss of RNAV navigation. Speaking of engine failure procedures, let's go over that next. So, just a quick look here at our FMC. The departure that we've got in here, as we said, was the Rebel. And it essentially departs the runway on a 007 heading with a 331 intercept to Rev G. A speed of 210 or below at or above 1,500 feet to Bebley, RG3, Kukli, Dud, Rebel, at or above 5, Auto, and points beyond on the departure. 5,000 feet to top altitude, that's set. We'll put ourselves back into map mode. Our engine failure or engine out procedure Specifies runway 1 visual doing the Amy RNAV, Clutch RNAV, Dr. RNAV, Porto, JW, Rebel, Scram, Suki, Wings RNAV departures. Minute cleanup altitude of 1,100 feet. So you can see here in the barrel we've got 1,100 feet instead of our standard 1,014 in the case of field elevation. Engine failure at or after V1. Climb via the SID and use visual reference to follow the middle of the Potomac River, reaching Rev G. Continue climb via SID. Min cleanup altitude of 1,100 feet MSL. At or above minimum published altitude for intended route, request radar vectors, or resume home navigation. Secondary engine out procedure in the case of where you're not visual, you're flying an RNAV, the engine failure procedure varies ever so slightly, in which it says very simply climb via the SID, which in this case again is 5,000 feet, mid cleanup altitude of 1,100 feet, and at or above minimum published altitude for intended route, request radar vectors, or resume home navigation. So a slight variance there as you can't see the river and follow the center line of the Potomac. With that said, we've got most of the aircraft set up here, and it should be pretty much ready for departure. We'll skip our standard briefings, seeing as this is just a focus on the departure procedure out of DCA. However, we've covered the SIF page. We have covered and gone over and reviewed our departure in the takeoff reference page. One thing to note on page 2, as our engine out acceleration height, our departure procedure did say our engine out acceleration height was actually 1,100 feet instead of the standard 1,000. So we put that here in both the all engine and engine out acceleration heights. A couple other things we could mention. Not too much more to go over than that. Some basic stuff here. Most of you already know the standard departure procedures, call outs, etc. So we'll just do a quick checklist here and get going. For takeoff checklist, departure plan is not required. Attendant notification is complete. Electrical generators on, any ice off. Packs, auto bleeds. Engines on, APU is off. Start switch is left. Continuous APU is off. Flaps. What do we got? CD1 indicates 1 with a green light. Start levers are idle and recall checked. Before takeoff, checklist is complete. And as you'll see when we roll out onto the runway here, you'll be able to see on the navigation display pretty well here how, as the aircraft swings around on runway heading, what the fix looks like and what you're going to want to do in terms of avoidance. Alright, we are clear right, clear left. Runway is verified, runway 1. Fuel is verified, departure plan, before takeoff checklist is complete. And just like normal, it's essentially a normal takeoff. All you're really worried about is this P-56 avoidance area. And now you can see on the ND swinging around there what that looks like exactly. Get a good little look at it here as we take the runway. We'll go ahead and stop, zoom in on that just for a second. And so as we said, we want to brief no deviations to the right of that line. We're going to let LNAV take over and fly that flight director very closely, especially with the lateral portion of that, to make sure that we stay out of that ring. Alright, set takeoff thrust 92.2. 92.2 set. $80 knots. you're up. Positive rate landing, you're up.
Positive rate climb.
So real tight on that LNAV. It's already engaged. And it's going left on the flight direction, so we're going to continue to follow that. Passing our 1100 feet, set speed, climb thrust. You can see I'm actually slightly to the left of that LNAV course. We're going to continue our climb to 5,000 feet. Passing the one bug, flaps up. Not sure why that's coming through. Alright, autopilot engaged. Stayed to the left of that course just fine. Out of the circle. Clean jet, clean up. And climbing out as normal. Level of 5,000 feet, that's about it.